I'm Catherine Strisik, everybody. And I'm actually going to put this back that way. And thank you for joining Jami and Sadiq and me. So the way things happened, the way this reading came together, a number of years ago, Sadiq had a few poems published in Taos Journal of International Poetry and Art when Veronica Golos and I were co-editing together. And some work you just don't forget a voice. And so when I saw that his book, Your Crib, My Qibla, did I say that correctly? Was published, I purchased it and read it right away, and thought how lovely it would be to have a reading, share an evening of poetry with Sadiq. And so as I was making the flyer, Jami wrote me and said she'd been thinking about me. And I had been thinking about her also. So it was just like this moment of stars lining up, I think. And I said, you want to read with us? And Jami and I had met a couple of years ago in a workshop of Lisa Getz here in Taos. And then we saw each other at the AWP in San Antonio, where right before we were locked down. So we took some pictures with our new books and smiled and had a grand time. And then I split early and came back to New Mexico because I was nervous about being too far from home as the pandemic was beginning. So here we are. And I recently watched a reading with Toy Derricott, where she said, and I love this, how the writing stays throughout all the journeys of life. So I'm delighted to be here in the company of Sadiq and Jami, and delighted to see all of your faces. Thank you for being here as we journey together. So Sadiq Dzuko is the author of Your Crib, My Qibla, University of Nebraska Press 2021. His chapbook Inside the Flower Room was selected by Kwame Dawes and Chris Abani for APBF New Generation African Poets Chapbook Series. His poems have appeared or are forthcoming in the Cincinnati Review, Gulf Coast, Kenyon Review, Oxford Poetry, Poetry Society of America, and so many other places. I'm not going to list them all, but numerous literary journals and magazines. He's a finalist of Brunel International African Poetry Prize and a recipient of fellowships and grants from Nebraska Arts Council, PEN America, Obsidian Foundation, and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where he is a PhD student and serves as an assistant poetry editor for Prairie Schooner. On a personal note, in Sadiq's collection, Your Crib, My Qibla, held is the space for mourning and lamentation, a song, a love song for a child lost, yet very found and embraced in Sadiq's embodied expression through rhythms made through breath, through the crafted syllables of poetry. There are these lines: if silence were a language, prancing in a hand-carved wood doll, what words would the world hear? So I give you Sadiq and his words.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for that wonderful introduction. And Veronica, I still remember, I was I'm gonna say all those years, and I then figure out that I'm still, young and, pretty much sweet 16. So I would say just a few years back. Thank you all for coming to share the space with us. And hopefully I'm gonna try and read from my book, Your Crib, My Qibla. I'm a very disorganized poet, but I take solace in knowing that, most poets are disorganized. I don't mean to speak for everyone, but how much time do I have to read?
Like 15 minutes. I think we'll each read for 15 minutes.
All right. I just started my timer, which I didn't stop from the last reading that I did. Okay. I'm gonna read something that I wrote for the book. It's like I don't know what it is, but I just realized a few weeks ago that I haven't been reading it, and it's literally the first words of the book. These are poems born out of grief and the celebration of our beloved daughter Baha, who we lost 21 days after her first birthday. In writing these poems, I feel like I am holding her in my hands. She is alive as grief, alive as memory, alive as song. The first poem that I would read is the first poem in the collection, titled Wine Glass. When your mother found strands of your hair hung up in the teeth of your comb, your father scrolled them into a wine glass. It bites him hard that your life happened like an hourglass with only a handful of sand. This split to the seam of his body, a split of darkness that won't kill him, but squeezes adrenaline into his veins, so he lives through the pain of your absence. He's not all right to speak. His voice rims with bereavement, and he wants to sing by your grave, child, now that birds blow songs through the window, count sadness on the prayer beads necklaced around his collar. If he had known the sky would inhale you out of him so quickly, he would have stayed with your toes forever in his hands. Your face is still everywhere, even in the places he is not looking. He presses a deep kiss on your grave, on your forehead, hands cloudy from rubbing the grave as if on your tender skin. The distance he feels is more than the 400 kilometers that often stands between you. He will travel this far to hold you against the moon. They say you are like his reflection, pulled out of the mirror he stares into. To pull you out, he plunges his hands inside himself and pulls. The next poem that I'll read is titled Interment. When we lost Baha, she was still being breastfed, and so her mother's breast was still milking for her. And this is a poem that tries to capture that. Interment. Your mother's breasts swell with milk. She cups each in her hands as she delicately squeezes the warm milk through puffed up nipples into a polythene bag, paces into the yard, roots her knees to the earth, hands muddied, as she digs the spot where she entombs the milk there in the place you used to play with your brother. She leans back, looks into an open sky, like one who has found a way of sending the milk across to you. The next poem that I'd read is titled Marshmallow. The thing about imagination is that, it has the potential of disrupting reality. And in this particular poem, I was trying to bring my daughter back to life. Marshmallow. Today, Baha is not dead. She is 6 years old, forcing marshmallow into his mouth says, I am grown enough to feed you, Abba, with the future. That's what she calls him. Just like her brother, he forces the depraved cumin flowers back into their seeds. The delight is that he has pulled his shadow back into his skin to salve his wounds. And all the times he sat crying are erased. Able to sidestep the void just as he wished. She is at his feet, playing with his toes as though they are extension of her toys. His image of love pronounced in the way she holds onto his big toe, rubbing her finger across its tail. Grandmother says, whatever he willed would become. He didn't understand until now how, over the years, he sat crying and watched her grow inside of him, unknotting regret until it becomes loose like a house made of smoke bricks. Whenever a brick is laid, the wind dispels it, and the house exists only in blueprint. He's traveling inside grandfather's clock, arrives at the garden where Baha serves him honeycomb in her mother's teacup. 30,000 leaves are supplicating to nature, and the air is pure. He picks apples for his daughter. His cupped palms, not an empty cave, a bowl of water for his child. She is drinking into the future, a transient hope deep inside, found by the girl in his body, the real version of himself. He thinks, 6 years ago, Baha went inside of me to keep her company, and we kept growing like two trees in a sterile field, the dream of marshmallows, and my daughter still alive. The next poem that I read is titled Shattered. A raven's song echoes against a wall where the bark of a tree is a rough marble face, a place to put his tongue so it says what needs to be heard. Nothing is sustained inside his mouth but stories that dip in everything looking for light inside the raven's mouth, steep in the dense waters of morning. Sadness runs like a white horse, deep into the gravity human eyes have never touched, until it scratches the place where a soul is weak, where a flaw is most visible, where light feels his bones until light and darkness collapse into each other. The mind turns into a hem, a black hole, where escape is a prayer that is never answered. Prayer is now the dark side of light, a night so impenetrable, heavy, with a silence that tears the neighborhood, his skin, his entire body. The next poem that I read is titled I'm trying to run away from some. Memories by the Sea. Imagine a forlorn child conceive the sun that rouses the mouth of the universe. Imagine it disappearing into the throbbing throat of night. Imagine the dark seams, thick threads that bind voices to a giant fold of silence. Imagine him rubbing his fingers across your picture, trying to close your lips with words as you wander off into the horizon. Imagine your face still a sky peering down into his mind. Now, imagine the sun as reverie, and there by a sea he is leaning to fetch a bit of that firmament. Imagine this, when his mother says your shadow, it's bedlam inside his body. A seashell swallows the wave back into its depths. Imagine looking deeply until his reflection convinces you you can exist as a fraction outside his corneas. Imagine you're a star, transient in his thoughts. Imagine he disposed those thoughts about you, in more thoughts about you. Imagine each time you feel like forgetting something about him, even if insignificant. Imagine glaring the blue zenith bordered in a surface marred by tides until the memories split apart by the sea reassemble like a solved puzzle picture. How he wishes you imitate that multiplicity and grow into the right places that would hold you whole. He hears the night, holds onto your voice like a basket finally able to hold water. Imagine he presses his feet against wet sand and slips through a footprint. Here is a mystery close to a shoreline, a portal. Here's the distance, the vast sea between your bodies, your voice still a light wading through the dark beyond the throes of separation. Imagine how you would communicate from here on. Grieving is the only way he speaks of nothing. The next poem that I'll read is titled Observation, and this from the second section of the book. The first section is in the third person voice, and the second section is a dialogue between the father and the deceased daughter. And this is in the voice of the child. Observations. There, Ba, I am praying that a hummingbird hands me its ability to hover and fly backward, back into a timepiece where I am myself in the bath water you prepared. Startled that a flower doesn't bloom, I brood over the idea of bereavement, a nest egg of sorrow. Because there's an ounce of life unfolding inside my tears, there is no right way to swallow a sullen peel. There's a spark of lifelessness in the bulb that fails to bloom. I miss you cleaning the dirt in my ears, miss you wiping filth off my kneecaps, scrubbing my face often so tenderly. Remember the day you put me to sleep on grandmother's mat? Everything I need now is inside the threadbare blankets you wrapped me in. Because here my body is a flea bag where loneliness governs like a dictator. View 2. From the past, Ba, dying is like moving into a future, past the street bursting with voices of people you know. I am a girl who looks like her father. Oku. 3. What do I know of a prayer other than it's a place where my knees root the ground and palms curve toward God like a child waiting to drink from his body? Because prayers often beget silence, I am in communion with the half-cleaved side of my melancholy. My mouth weighed the puzzle in the air, where I imagine your body pillowing mine on the heels of your hands. Hudu 4. Ba, when I close my eyes, we are looking the moon in the eye, the perfect place to dream into, our bones gleaming in its dim light. Mother once dropped in my ears these words: a fantasy comes true if imagined thoroughly. BR 5. I hear stars cracking. Perhaps you're the most tragic victim of my fantasy. From where I stand, it's easier to pull the earth closer to my forehead than to wait for my prayers to be answered. Shida 6. I am lacing your hair into a rope of desire, a collection of things beyond one's reach. I think I still have time for 2 poems. And I'm going to turn to the last 2 poems of, oh no, I'm going to read, my son asked me if I miss my daughter. The thing, Baha had an elder brother, and my wife and myself were consumed in our own grief, that we didn't pay attention that he was also grieving his sister until after a year when we had moved to the state. My son asks if I miss my daughter. It's an aching beauty when your brother misses you, says a tornado swells inside his water flask. I wonder what music brews. I'm holding back tears at the dining table, slicing tomatoes on flatbread. I make out time to sick memories. The whole room ties up in a foil of grief. A strong smelling herb that cures nothing. He asks if I miss you playing muddy puddle, his question compressed like a riddle. Where is my sister? On a chopping bird, the onion isn't enough room. My burning body spills out onto the pan. I explain my silence like a hummingbird's throat, crowded with relics, stardust, and ash. I am still. When he asks about you, my reply is half in epigrams that hold no sense. Sometimes, like prayers, stuck in my throat, a fishbone. His questioning rattles my heart. When I close my eyes, it feels like a ghost is singing my song, but it fades when I turn. I wonder what music brews this massive silence. And the last two poems. Waterlog. When mother whispered, "What doesn't kill you?" I replied, "Turns me into a living corpse." I am the spitting image of my shadow, a face absorbed into a night, aching from what has been ripped off. I am fluent in my silence. What transpires after stars collapse? What happens if the dead turn into trees, coiled into the passage of time, blabbering about its inadequacy to erase existence? The agony is a silent war in my body. Each time I open my mouth to speak, inhaling more pain that jam-packs my lungs like a riot ground. Come into my foxhole with eyes that see what others can't. Let's shadow each other. I will collect the light that leaked into the Patchen River. My eyes are a window, waterlogged with tears. I cannot see anything other than what frightens me. I am living off my fear. How do I consent to joy? If it's a currency, what can it buy? All I want is to crawl away from a house built in perpetuity for grief, with corners spidered with longing, pain, and tears. My tongue inside a keyhole cannot unlock the door. And the final poem is titled 1 Year After, and it's literally the last poem in the collection that I wrote, and on the day of the first anniversary of her passing. 1 year after. Today is a year since the earth opened its mouth to the size of your body and swallowed. Like a ghost, I am learning to walk the earth without my body. Regret, a rosary wrapped around my wrist, leads me away from the universe's favor. If death is truly everywhere on earth, where could I have hidden you from its grasp? Perhaps behind a star that shines every 500 years. The shaft of sorrow, like sunlight striking the ground where I stand. God knows that I am not perfect, but I have found the pearl in loving you. Each time in the swirling vapor of love, I hold you, blended into the rainbow, marking its body across the skyline. The world stops spinning. Instead, a bubble grows over it, and time cannot exert itself on us. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadiq. That was beautiful. And I just want to say his book can be bought from University of Nebraska Press. You can go on to their site, University of Nebraska Press. Gorgeous. Thank you. So Sadiq, I think Jami is going to read next.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's an honor to be introducing Jami to you all. Jami works as a teacher at Simon Fraser University, as editor of the online poetry magazine, The Maynard, and as a writer of essays, reviews, and poetry. She's the author of the ecofeminist poetry collection, The Minute. Yeah, I'm gonna kill that, but sorry. The Mini Uses, Mountain West poetry series titled, published by the Center for Literary Publishing at Colorado State University. And Jami is the winner of the 2020 New Mexico Arizona Book Award. She is also the author of 3 chapbooks of poetry, including Mind of Spring, Valum chapbook series, a walking meditation contemplating social, cultural, environmental, and personal mechanisms of war, accompanied by the Palo Verde, Arizona State Tree 3, and the winner of the 2017 Valum Chapbook Award. Her work has been honored by financial support from Arizona Commission on Earth, Banff Center for Arts and Creativity, British Columbia Arts Council, and by editors at American, Australian, British, and Canadian journals. Help me all in welcoming Jami.
Thank you, Sadiq. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Really lovely to be with you. I just need a moment. Sadiq, just such beautiful, heart-affecting poems. Thank you. Thank you very much for going there, you know, with your heart in language, and for bringing your heart to us. It's hard to speak about those poems, and it feels a bit like there's an ocean inside of me from them. So they're very, very beautiful. Thank you. And thanks for offering your words of introduction for me. The title of my book is The Minuses. And I'll be reading from that book this evening. I want to do a land acknowledgement. I'm in Vancouver, BC, which I want to gratefully recognize the Native Nations of the West here, especially the group called the Coast Salish. And I live sometimes in Arizona, and because I'm going to be reading poems from the Minuses, and many of those poems are located in the Sonoran Desert surrounding Tucson, Arizona, I want to also acknowledge the O'odham as the traditional and rightful owners of the lands where I have the great privilege to live and to work. Okay. So the Minuses, here we are. And let's see how we do. And then one more acknowledgement before I start. I would be remiss. Lisa Gett is here, and she was the most wonderful midwife to these poems that I could have asked for. So I'm really grateful to Lisa. I will always be grateful to her, and I bow to you for being here. I'm really glad to see you, my dear. The book and the poems are dedicated to the one who renders this ground known and unknown. Ah, Martin, you're here. Good, just in time, my dear. So I'm going to start with the title poem of the book. It's also called The Minuses, And it has in it the line, the minuses count the ways. And of course, this will bring to mind, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. The opening line in How Do I Love Thee, this sonnet 43 by English poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who wrote during the Victorian era. This poem, I think, attempts to confront that. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. The minuses. Better to live high in the mountains, in the eyes airy, the mind on a roof, the ring in its little box, I thought. But the peaks name their valleys, the sky its lunar phase, gravity its refrigerator. And this bulb onion, husks pale as your vows, peeled layers arrive at the same sum. The minuses count the ways. Odor of onion, the dominant hand, one half the equation. So as I mentioned, many of the poems are located, live in, and come out of the Sonoran Desert. And this is a region of high biodiversity. It hosts, 60 mammal species, 350 bird species, 20 amphibian species, over 100 reptile species, 50 native fish. You don't think of fish in the desert, but they're there. And this is one of the amazing statistics to me, 1,000 native bee species. And of course, 2,000 native plant species. Two-way, on the roof. Isn't the desert verdant, he says, after rain? Clouds gain and feather white, sky absolute blue, until a raven flew through. I feel a smallness in my chest, he says. My life is missing something. She looks at the clouds, revealing and obscuring the missing thing. There's something missing in me, she says. The sky is entire, summa summarum, the sum of all sums. He says, I am not ready to separate myself from my life. To propel upward, press through the clamped down lid. A two-way bed is the all that's needed. A mutual plot, a mutable platform, a tier table, a tea bench. One moment replaces another. Rotors supply the lift, pitch and spool up. Through the wind's dusty lid, thrown open, open, in the earth abandoned swirl. So I have this thing apparently about the state tree of Arizona. It's called the Palo Verde, palo meaning stick, verde green, so green stick tree. It blooms this crazy jostle of, because it's windy in the desert in the spring, a crazy jostle of yellow blossoms. It does all of its photosynthesis through the bark, so there's very spare leaves on it, and it's bright green. By virtue of and, honey given, honey taken. By virtue of and, we divide and separate, branching into Palo Verde, green stick tree, precipitating yellow blossoms, green tree, yellow blossoms. A mind sticks on certain images, certain colors. The phone buzzes. It's the neighbor again. She wishes someone would do something about the bees. Yellow blossoms, delicate, fluted. What wind they need blows. The blossoms let go easily, falling one at a time. It's impossible to determine the moment of separation. Descent, a small scheme in the wind's theorem. Thin attachment. I've been thinking, of course, a lot about the desertification of the earth, desert. There was a heat dome, you probably heard about it in Vancouver last week. It's crazy, it was crazy hot here. And also, of course, in the desert, it's technically monsoon season. So maybe this could be our rain dance together. Thin attachment. At this hour, any god is rain. A woman pulls plastic from a dumpster, holds it up to her body to see if it fits. She inhabits blatantly her wish to be dry. The rain inhabits its falling. My car inhabits the street. The wind winds the woman wrangling the plastic. A gull of newsprint scuds the fogged windscreen, veers me to a halt. My steering wheel, hands at 2 and 10, her shopping cart filled with clothes and wet cardboard. Morning's thin attachments. On the street of beggars, a monsoon wealth. So more flora of the desert will appear here. Somehow my, pardon me for moving about, my light is shifting here. Sway. When wind inaugurates rain, I climb aboard the hammock, strong enough for 2. I do not want sensation without emotion. One has to wait, not will, feel, not talk, spend the day in sway to be who one is, without analysis of occupation, family, or menu. I want to be in love in the world and at the lunch table, poppies, tin plate, aubergine, green pepper, potato, curry. Day-long want too strong to wonder my actions into non-actions, to read between what he said and my desire. To remember is a wish to feel more. Among the saguaro, agave, ocotillo, and cholla flowers, I sway in the mold of my own back, memorized by mouth, by hands. Fridays of love, weeks of nothing nobler than the body. So the book is organized in 3 sections, and perhaps the first section focuses on relationships and the minuses that occur there. And of course, always the minusing of the desert and the heat is alive throughout the book. This second section, the minuses perhaps manifest more as kinds of violences that take place. The minuses that we exact on one another, on environment, and on ourselves. Dedication to subtraction, to being taken and being taken from, to be an integer, a thorn-snagged single strand of hair, wavering in the mathematics of withdrawal. Take one person from another, then subtract the one remaining. Subtract desert from desert. the calling of something within. Rather than investigate meaning or make a world of thought, she acknowledges the tendency of a broken line to curve. She acknowledges the circle. There is no obvious beginning. The circle navigated by coordinates, polar, parametric, Cartesian. Each point, a locus of all points, holds to itself. She edges the circumference, leans far out from the edge to fulfill her attraction to what withdraws. The height a bird flies depends on the bird. And given distance from a given point. I cross a third degree of a great circle. The full moon gathers wet footsteps from stones. At night, gravity defines silences between oceanic miles. By the time waves replace themselves or the cockle shells split, scars my palms exactly like wings. The stars seated in the dark pass our lives across the table. I dreamed him invisible in 1,000 places. Night played remorse. I witnessed a woman torn from her bicycle. That woman, no longer blackbirds. And then let's see, earlier it is, maybe he left us. Yeah, did Don leave? Maybe he did. He had gulls behind him. Ah, there he is. Hey, so look, Don has these gulls behind him. And so I wanted to read this poem for you and for that fabulous background you have. It's called Between Earth and Sky. Even with eyes closed, there's a horizon. Morning ascends. Many, many design the sand with their feathers. She is more present when she wears a dress. The world feels more fragile standing at the hull of a prawn boat. The lines in her hand string beads of sand, contour of shorebake, the sometimes smell of beachweed. The gulls lift, a singular mind from the grid. She stares into the birds, coordinates of flight gliding away from immobility, walks backward to watch her own disappearing, hair tasting of salt. When she turns, she wings. Okay, and then the third section is where the desert takes over. It's really a desertification that happens in the book, if you will. This is called Desert Opus. Sun, sun, no cloud, no shade trees, no cool sea, no rain, no train, no show. Shine, shine, no shade bees, no butterflies, no birds, breeze, November. Sun, sun, no dark, no moon, no dawn. Sun, sun, high noon, no morn, maroon. No proper time of day. Monsoon desert. She is what she fears, and in the desert, she fears the sun. The sun suppresses, a claw fallen on the landscape. Desert waxes, waxes. The present is all to know of the known. This wind speed at right angles to the mountains incinerates the dirt road. Dust devils the quotient of wounding words on the memory board. A lightning scorched tree, one thin limb curled inward. The areola of cumulus darken. Air's electrical changes produce ozone's pungent zing. Thunder's brontide echoes the gap. She waits for the quenching. Wind roams the empty shell of the house. And then because we're still we're out or somewhat out of the heat perhaps of the pandemic, the nexus of it, but because of this notion of zoonotic diseases being on our minds now and front and center, I want to read a poem called Endangered Species, which takes on the illegal trafficking of animals and its relationship to aphrodisiacs and sexuality, sexual expression. Endangered species. Hail of pink light, desert microburst, pearl hail pelts human bodies and industrial machinery contiguous with meteorologists' heat liberating weather. Our bodies pocked by what surrounds them. A snippet gains no more depth. In this mecca of an eroticism, a tiger skeleton marinates in an aquarium. The dark tonic said to supply tiger stamina. For thematic coherence, follow the grail of wine bones. The liquor affects desire, not ability. With undainty haste, always yes and no, the illicit thing partial. To pull together certain themes, the new century's new couple enters late. Zinfandel on their cheeks, accretion of context, not meaning. The division flimsy connected to other such moments implicated in the world's disgraces. Denouement at the serial killing of rhinoceros and seahorses, ode to the demand for aphrodisiacs and medicine no stronger than aspirin. Lifestyles keep the demand infinite. From the grid of structure, the last gesture toward the body, a burning fragment in the menagerie of the surviving world. And then I'll close with this one, the last poem in the book, The Finder. The weighted boots her feet wear and her willing feet. In this panorama of sharp and conservative plants, she is an internal aspect, a within of the desert, enshrouded in a black dress. Or does she walk through the desert where she is misunderstood and misunderstands? Boot prints through the verbena and verbena growing in her boot prints. Autumn tilts the planet. The length of the day becomes the length of the night. Her hem unravels on a thorn, evidence of her migration, a black thread. The finder could know her as anyone, anyone. She walks in this place, void of resemblances, beyond understanding, where never is allowed to accumulate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jami.
Yeah, thank you.
Gorgeous.
Okay, my dears. Thank you all very much for your beautiful attention, really. Lots of love to you. So I want to introduce to you our intrepid host and the one who has been the lead in putting this together for us, creating this space for us, and that is our Catherine Strisik. I learned a couple of things about Miss Kath, as I call her. First of all, we have these connections because we both grew up in New Hampshire, different parts of the state, but still. And we're all both middle children. So there's so much that we have in common, as you might imagine. Let me read you her bio. So Catherine Strisik, poet, teacher, editor, is Taos, New Mexico's Poet Laureate for 2020 and through 2021, with an enlivening poetry and nature project enriching the community with poetry from many poets in North America displayed at various museums, foundations, writing organizations, land trusts, and elsewhere. She is a recipient of the 2020 Thalassemia Award as Woman of Impact based on literary contribution, is the author of Insectum Gravitis, finalist New Mexico Arizona Book Award in Poetry for 2020, also author of The Mistress, awarded the New Mexico Arizona Book Award for Poetry in 2017, and this is a chapbook, I think, titled Thousand Cricket Song. And she has recently completed the manuscript, And They Saw Me Turn to Hear Them, a semi-finalist already for the Philip Levine Prize in Poetry for this year, 2021. Her numerous publications span over 30 years, amazing, including Pushcart Prize nominations and with poetry translated into Greek, Persian, and Bulgarian. Strisik is co-founding editor of Taos Journal of International Poetry and Art. And you can read more about her at her website. So please join me in welcoming Catherine Strisik.
Thanks, Jami. I know when I thought of 30 years of publishing, I mean, there are years that go by without any published work, believe me, like this last year, basically. But it is amazing the thought that goes into sending out and that part of the brain when that clicks in compared to the brain of sitting quietly and trying to write poetry. So thank you for the introduction. And as I said earlier, I'm just honored and delighted to be sharing this evening with Jami and Sadiq. And I thought about reading from my books, but I'm going to read some new poems and old poems that somehow work with the poems that were written earlier in the pandemic. And those poems are called Dear Unholy. And they somehow go with poems that I wrote when I stayed for kind of a retreat self-residency at Christ in the Desert Monastery in Abiquiu a number of years ago when I was starting The Mistress. But I want to start with this one poem that I think fits into this body of work also. I was many, many years ago working as a hospice volunteer. And I had one of the women who I sat with at the end of her life was Cleo. So this poem is, let me just say it has a couple of Spanish words in it. Oigo, meaning I hear, and then tu has tomado, you have taken. Cleo's brain tumor and 9 orders of angels in Arroyo Hondo. How the clipped wing flutters in silhouette of an angel into the deaf ear of Cleo. How she says, oigo, with the unfolding back of her body brittled. How her body's archangel carries heavy in perspiration, in early blooming birds' notions when hips undulations thrust in birth's spasms. Principality of female areola, and her mouth the Spanish Bible's memory tú has tomado. How powers, white and Bible worn, appear to read virtue. Cleo crossing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, even her three-legged chihuahua in my presence, while listening to Spanish spill from salt of dominions. How the unfolding back lifts her bare feet with the three thrones as if this is the body's path. Joan of Arc, not her, more cherubim, her own baby face. In the thrust, seraphim's three sets of wings. Oigo, she says twice. Laugh fevered, wings folding. So this is one of those poems I wrote I wrote an early draft when I was at Christ in the Desert Monastery in Abiquiu. Nole me tangere, touch me not, touch me at the chama. At a time of day when the temperature drops, the hooded hidden ones with their plain black robes pray. Each water-filled glass quenches the spirit. I do not enter 5 days of monastic life to fool an astonished monk into fire. No, no, to the one who accompanies me with his waxing, waning impulsivity, evening air, cool abandonment, where I describe shape shift by 5 p.m. to him, quartz in the shape of a whale's jaw, faith, its crystalline grin from the red rock cliffs outside my wound above my cell. I touch close to an electric god, billow breath loud, forgotten guidance, touch close to the affectionate goat, the sulfur water rippling tepid. Pray for my leave taking, touch me half empty vessel, savored by rustling in the bush, hovering an inch closer to the edge of the mimicked cliff, the man's wide eyes and his want, and damned by the body leaning forward, damned by the floorboard and stone speckled, the singular bush at the clamorous edge. The music here, Gregorian, as if song could strip all human desire, each psalm of fingered ritual where the chama flows. Night vespers about to begin. I've loved the folds in my napkin, the lush, humbled martyr who tomorrow, with passion and momentary triumph, chooses solitude. So the monk and I have something scarred to release, a small addiction to broken bread or delicate palms awakened in this canyon, this monastery's sweet cackle frayed. Dear Unholy, I know the lilacs and the lizard and the overgrown blades of grass. I know the fruit trees, the branches they'll last grasp, the boulder with mica, snow peas, and parsley. I know the seasoned weather vane pointing east like a sentinel, like a god unrelenting. Which way, sings an angel, yellow-breasted redhead. Some suffering is capable of causing bad weather. the buzz of bumblebees, the whir of sheened hummingbird, a twisted root system, the felled branch caught in cottonwood limbs face up. Unholy, it is May 9 here, close to Mother's Day, the dawn my father remedied his suffering with my brother and I watching our whiplashed dawn, the aroused and simplicity of a last breath. Years later, palms filled with the last soft chipped gray of him, I released us into the meadow. There must have been a mockingbird and song in the ash grays of my unfamiliar and familiar father near my cabin by the creek. No yellow dandelion underfoot, no, but yes, a young apricot with bright white blossoms, the grappling daughter of Unholy, I believe the day filled with vellum of an apricot's aftermath. So this poem is in two voices. 5 days, Christ in the desert, Abiquiu. Call me by a name not my own, and cows, long-tongued sacreds. When I listen again, I hear coyotes intended to guide. I hear the whole canyon is moonlit, and the monks pray on gravel not perfectly composed with sunlight. Ah, now I see an undwelling monastery, arranged concentration, an iridescence on hosts' faces who journey the same journey each day into a raw hush of bitter, precious sinners. I am a spilt form, sensuous against red-rayed canyon, uncombed hair. We attempt to stare ahead, shielded from an unease that's not meant to shame. Who will blot our sweat? Yet we do desire this ruin to feed their solitude with my trembling tongue. Did I say sacred cow? When monks walk their good ear to delicate messengers, I imagine scissors and no skylark here, and of cutting each other's hair, the pignon's whipped bark left out to bleed. I have been received here by no ordinary salvation, a turmoil on satin sheets. Now tuck me in. Melt beeswax votives into my mouth. Monks bow their faces always toward the river's current and bend as if in their ecstasy is revealed my dissolve. And this last poem. Dear Unholy, on Mother's Day when apple blossoms permeate cock crow, and I am alive, dear Unholy, noon burns the back of my neck. And would I be more angelic, chimed, composed, begotten, blurred, coupled with low, high cadence, the globe willow's green fur, the peculiar, again, sinew sweetness of earth's vortex. And I am alive, dear Unholy, unnaturally illumined, the hummingbird, safe even in its boisterous shortcomings. In any breeze, the weather vane tips northeast toward Taos Mountain. Pinon smoke rises from its shell as the indigenous splendor blows breath onto sparks. This year, cottonwood leaves, circular green, shimmer in the breeze. Some birds find their food elsewhere, the ones that fly closest to the dirt. Dear Unholy, I forgot to fill their feeders. At 5 p.m., the back of my neck burns still. And last year's oak leaf branches dry from last year's San Geronimo Day before the virus acknowledged itself. In the pandemic, I discover wealth of blue and yellow maize in fields never touched by me. So when I awaken, pull back the grazing land, its strands, also its wheat, its silk. I am trying, Unholy, to make a home of light, I hope my daughter recognizes and remembers. Thank you. Thank you. I think we can all unmute ourselves now. Thank you for the listening and the time.
Beautiful. And the combination of the three of you was just so imaginative, you know, the depth of Sadiq and the intellectual and nature, you know, and then sort of Kathy combining both. I felt like you were all three talking to each other too, as poets. It was really beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful evening. It was very, very special, and thank you all.
Thanks, Marjorie.
Yes, that takes us to that place, that darkness, that edge, and brings us back into the light all at the same time. Wonderful. Well done. Well done.
Thanks, Phaedra. Does anybody have any questions or anything to ask, or we can be done?
Now, what was the book you were reading from? What was your book title?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but it's not a complete book yet. I'm reading sheets of paper
Oh, okay.
that I keep in a
Okay.
folder that will hopefully next year be maybe become a book.
I'm sure it will.
A
I'm
manuscript.
sure it will.
So
Let's see.
but it's called Dear Unholy is the working title of mine. So, yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to thank everybody for a wonderful trinity of mind, body, and spirit that was just emerging from all three of you and brought us into such a intimate circle of life and maiden mother, virgin maiden mother, goddess, father, unholy and holy leader, father, caring person. Sadiq, thank you for your family, bringing us into the goodness of the most amazing travel one parent could ever do.
Yeah.
and all joy to you with your son, and learning that after a year, it was then remembering what your son was also missing and his growth and change. And we are family, and we have had a great anointment tonight. Thank you, Catherine. And
You're welcome.
thank you very much, Jami, for our desert tour. Yeah. Whew. Now I cry.
Kathy?
Yes, Nancy.
Hi. I had
Hi.
a crazy suggestion. You know, ever since we did that evening when all my friends read my poems because I couldn't, it occurred to me that if each one of you had read one of the other person's poems, there would have been an exchange that might have even further brought it into life. I don't know. It's just something, I never forget that sound that you hear when poetry is read. Your poetry, which you rarely hear read by anybody else, right? Usually you have to get them to read it. So that was just a suggestion I happen to thank you because it's bringing all sorts of ideas, and it's the community of poetry. And poetry is like a land without language. We can't have a language without language, and we can't have language without poetry.
Thanks, Nancy. Well, I think we're all set, and you saw in the chat that where you can buy different books. Just really privileged to have you all as our audience, and your generous observations and comments. And thank you, Sadiq and Jami. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for making this precious space for us to gather together. Really, it means that, you know, dear friends of mine from Sweden could be here, and Sadiq is in Nebraska, and I'm in Vancouver, and many of you are tuning in from Taos, and there's some other people here from Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. So, and Alicia's in Seattle, probably, or thereabouts. So it just, even though we are these weird, you know, Hollywood Squares romper rooms, we're still together in this kind of, you know, I don't know, at a global space. And it means a lot to me, because otherwise I wouldn't get to be with you, you know, from this other place. So many blessings to you all. Thank you so much for sharing your ears and your hearts, and to Sadiq and Catherine for sharing your beautiful words.
Thanks, Jami. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for
Good
doing
night.
it. Thank you.